If it could happen to her, with her lawyers, her mic, her platform, how safe are the rest of us? What happened in that courtroom wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning, a turning point in America's long bitter battle for justice. And it all began on a cold morning at the Alexandria Federal Courthouse. The air inside was heavy, thick like smoke, thick enough to choke on. Every seat was filled, every hallway packed with cameras, reporters, and a crowd that didn't come seeking justice. They came for a fall, not just any fall. The public destruction of a black congresswoman, a woman who spoke too loudly, rose too quickly, and refused to play by the rules written by the powerful. The buzz quieted the moment the courtroom doors creaked open. Judge Clarence Thomas stepped out, draped in a black robe. His gaze was sharp, his lips tight. He didn't glance at the crowd, as if everything beyond the bench was beneath him. Gay-em. Washington held its breath. At the defense table sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, back straight, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the bench with cold, composed intensity. Her navy blazer was forgettable. Her presence was not. She didn't flinch as Judge Thomas lifted the gavel, adjusted his glasses, and began reading the verdict. The room leaned forward. And then, the hammer fell. This court finds the defendant, Representative Jasmine Crockett, guilty of willfully providing false information to federal agencies and donors in violation of the Hope Forward Initiative standards. Severity, extreme. Consequences, far-reaching. Civil penalty, $500 million, payment due within 90 days. The gasp rippled like a shockwave. No spin, no filters, just raw disbelief. People turned to one another, asking silently, "Did I hear that right? $500 million, more than the GDP of some countries." Cameras flashed like fireworks. Reporters scrambled to record history as it unfolded. Even the court stenographer paused. And Jasmine, silent, still, unshaken. Only the rise and fall of her breath beneath her blouse betrayed the storm inside. She turned to her lawyer and gave the smallest of nods, as if to say, "The game has just begun." Judge Thomas gave no further comment, one final strike of the gavel. Recess. But the real story had already begun to write itself. They thought they had broken her. They clearly didn't know Jasmine Crockett. This is a woman who walks into a federal courtroom with nothing but a gas station coffee and a folder full of grit. Before she stepped into Congress, she was a civil rights attorney. No wealth, no connections, just truth, conviction, and a memory, sharp as a blade. She got her break on a live televised debate, the night that changed everything. Her car ran out of gas 2 blocks from the studio. She didn't panic. She ran, heels and all, arriving 30 seconds before airtime, and still won the debate with an argument so sharp it cut through the noise. The judge once called her a hurricane in lipstick. Jasmine laughed at that line for a full week. She didn't rise through cocktail parties or Ivy League circles. She rose by taking the cases no one else would touch. Wrongful deportations, racial discrimination, labor exploitation. She never begged for recognition. She earned it by confronting those who abused power, no matter how high they stood. When Jasmine Crockett walked into Congress, no one rolled out a red carpet. No one picked her. She just refused to be ignored. That's why today, everyone in that courtroom expected her to crumble. But they didn't know Jasmine, not the woman who once quoted Frederick Douglass in the middle of a hostile hearing, who keeps her mother's deportation notice framed on her desk as a reminder of the stakes, who is willing to lose everything but her honor. Outside, the media circled like vultures. The headlines were already drafted. The collapse of a rising black star. Charity or con? Crockett's fall from grace. Inside, the whispers turned poisonous. She's done. Too cocky for her own good. Just another corrupt politician. And then he walked in. Malcolm Reed, federal prosecutor, impeccably tailored suit, TED Talk voice, that smug, too-polished smile. To the jury of public opinion, he was the hero. The man about to drag a corrupt Congresswoman from her pedestal. He stood across from Jasmine like a hunter eyeing a wounded animal. But there was one thing Malcolm Reed didn't know. Today's prey wasn't prey. And this wasn't a trial. It was a trap. The courtroom still buzzed from the shock of the $500 million verdict when Jasmine tilted her head, just slightly. Her eyes didn't move. Her face didn't change. But her voice, barely louder than a breath, slipped through the live mic. Show them what they tried to bury. A whisper. But it struck like a match to gasoline. Illa Hartman, Jasmine's lead counsel, didn't flinch, didn't smirk. No theatrics, only precision. She reached under the table and pulled out a battered yellow file folder, thick, creased, heavy with secrets. Her movement was so deliberate, it felt like a magician preparing for the final reveal. Silent, unshakable, tense enough to make the entire room forget to breathe. Phones went still. Pens froze. Even Judge Clarence Thomas leaned forward, one eyebrow raised, for the first time. Interested. He said nothing, but his face said it all. Proceed. Illa stood, adjusted her blazer, and approached the bench with the calm weight of truth. She placed the folder down gently and said, Your Honor, before this ruling is enforced, the defense respectfully moves to submit newly discovered evidence. We believe these materials fundamentally alter the nature of this case. Judge Thomas's voice was frigid. Miss Hartman, the submission window has closed. The ruling has been issued. What could possibly justify this motion? Illa's response was a scalpel, because this evidence was intentionally concealed from us, Your Honor. We received it only 3 days ago, from a whistleblower inside the Department of Justice. The courtroom erupted. Gasps tore through the silence like shattering glass. Reporters leapt to their feet, phones lit up in a frenzy. Malcolm Reed spun so fast it looked like someone slapped him. His smile vanished, his expression unraveled, layer by layer, like wax melting in a flame. Judge Thomas didn't reach for the folder right away. He stared into Illa's eyes, looking not for loopholes or legal tricks, but for lies, for manipulation, for games. He found none, only the unwavering stillness of someone telling the truth. Then, finally, he opened the folder. Page 1. An internal DOJ audit, stamped, signed, verified. Its conclusion, the anomalies tied to the Hope Forward initiative, were the result of a third-party software classification error. No fraud, no misconduct, not even a cover-up, just a system glitch, and a scapegoat named Jasmine Crockett, an internal DOJ email. We've reviewed everything. There's no clear evidence Crockett misled anyone. Pursuing charges could backfire politically. Delay public disclosure. Optics are the main concern. The courtroom went still. Clerks stood frozen behind their desks. The silence wasn't absence. It was history, hanging in the air. Every page Illa Hartman turned sliced deeper through the facade, revealing not just a misstep, but a system-wide rot. Judge Clarence Thomas read faster now, each line dragging him deeper. This wasn't accusation anymore. This was truth, stamped, signed, verified. While Jasmine Crockett was being thrown to the wolves of public opinion, The truth had been locked away, buried behind DOJ doors. Illa said nothing more. She stepped back, letting the documents speak for themselves. Across the courtroom, Malcolm Reed, once polished, poised, began to unravel. He clutched the folder like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. His associate stared blankly ahead, shell-shocked. Their case hadn't just crumbled, it had disintegrated. The betrayal wasn't just legal, it was moral. Jasmine had been smeared, a liar, a fraud, a criminal. Now the courtroom saw the truth. She was set up, and still, Jasmine didn't move. She didn't need to. For the first time that morning, she wasn't the one on trial. The system was. Judge Thomas, the so-called chiseled face of the law, trembled. His hand, the same one that had signed hundreds of Supreme Court opinions, now gripped the file like it might be the last thing keeping him upright. He exhaled. Software error. He whispered, the first crack in the marble. What he read wasn't just new information. It was a betrayal of everything his courtroom was supposed to stand for. The DOJ hadn't merely missed something. They had known. They knew the truth, and they charged her anyway, because she was too dangerous, too loud, too unwilling to play by their rules. No one moved. No one spoke. Jasmine sat still, eyes forward. No anger. No begging. Because this moment wasn't about her anymore. It was about every person ever buried because they weren't considered worth hearing. Malcolm Reed collapsed. His hands trembled. The documents slipped through his fingers and scattered across the courtroom floor. He lunged to gather them, banging his head on the table in the scramble. Someone in the press gallery coughed to cover a laugh. His red tie clung to his neck like a noose, a symbol of his own ego closing in. A frantic aide leaned in. "Do you want?" "I've got this," Malcolm snapped. He didn't. Judge Thomas adjusted his glasses, took a long, deliberate breath. Then his voice cut through the room, low and solemn as a funeral bell. "Prosecutor, Reed, do you have anything to add before this court proceeds?" Malcolm opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time, his voice, his sharpest weapon, had abandoned him. Across the room, Illa Hartman almost smiled. She'd watched this man build a case on arrogance. Now the courtroom watched him drown in it. Judge Thomas turned back to the bench. A new silence fell. Not suspense, reverence. Then he spoke, and his words felt like stone tablets being etched. Upon review of the evidence submitted by the defense, this court confirms that exculpatory materials were willfully withheld, constituting a serious violation of federal transparency and due process. He paused. Each word was a nail sealing the coffin of a corrupted institution. This concealment did not merely deny the defendant her fundamental rights. It has stained the credibility of this court, this institution, and the very meaning of justice. Hereby vacated, effective immediately. A thunderbolt cracked through the courtroom. Pens dropped. Reporters froze mid-keystroke. Someone whispered, Yes, he really did. Jasmine closed her eyes, not in victory, not in relief, but like someone finally releasing a weight they'd carried too long. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Judge Thomas adjusted his glasses. His tone shifted, heavier, grounded in something deeper than law. This court is not adjourned, because what we witnessed today was not merely a miscarriage of justice. It was the system functioning exactly as it was designed to. Jasmine opened her eyes and met his. For the first time, they truly saw each other. A black judge, a black Congresswoman, no longer divided by bench and bar. Just two Americans staring down a fractured system. She nodded. This was never just about clearing her name. It was about putting the system itself on trial. The next morning, just steps from the Capitol, the press briefing room was packed, wall to wall, no space to stand, cameras, boom mics, bodies layered on breath. But no one came for sound bites. They came to witness something America rarely gives itself, a reckoning. At 9:32 a.m., Jasmine Crockett stepped to the podium. No banners, no stage-managed applause. Just her, the American flag, a plain white placard bearing her name. No speechwriters, no teleprompters, just the fire in her eyes. And the truth. She scanned the room. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I know what you came to hear. You want me angry. You want me to gloat. You want me to say, I told you so. A few chuckles, not from humor, but shame. Jasmine didn't smile. She leaned into the mic. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for reform. The room froze. I'm not standing here as a victim or just a survivor. I'm standing here as living proof that our justice system can be hijacked, not by accident, but by design. Cameras zoomed in, fingers flew across keyboards, and then she laid out the plan. No political theater, no posturing, just the blueprint for change. Mandatory evidence disclosure. If it proves innocence, it must be submitted. No more. Forgot. No more. Still under review. Heads nodded. Real whistleblower protections. Not soft language. Not loopholes. Nobody should have to choose between conscience and career. She never said the whistleblower's name. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. Bipartisan Judicial Oversight Council. And no more hiding behind party lines. If prosecutors bend the truth, they're held accountable. If judges ignore exculpatory evidence, they're held accountable. Publicly. Her voice never rose, but each word struck like a hammer, not for applause, but for the voiceless. This isn't for optics. It's for the people who'll never trend, for the ones who don't get cameras in their courtroom, who don't get a second chance. Silence. Then, a single clap, then another, and another, until the entire room rose. No one prompted it. No one planned it. Truth did. Jasmine turned back to the mic one last time. Her eyes shimmered, not with pain, but resolve. Justice shouldn't depend on how loud your voice is, or how deep your pockets go. It should depend on the truth. Period. It wasn't just a closing line. It was a new beginning. A hyphen turned into a movement. A trial turned into a transformation. An exclamation mark in history. 3 days later, several senior DOJ officials were placed on immediate suspension. The media exploded. DOJ withheld evidence. Political motive in Crockett case. Whistleblower rocks Washington. Then came the leak that stopped the nation cold. A Zoom clip, grainy, unfiltered. A senior DOJ attorney sipping coffee, unaware the recording hadn't ended. We had to bring her down. If we don't control the narrative, she'll be unstoppable. By midterms, a voice off screen. Wait, are we still recording? 5 seconds of silence. Then the screen went black. 1 million views in 48 hours. The laughter online wasn't joy. It was bitter. A country numbed by lies had finally seen one too clear to spin. Emergency session. House Oversight Committee. Inspector General launched a full criminal investigation. For the first time in years, even the untouchables began to sweat. And the unexpected face of that reckoning. The very woman once forced to defend her name, Jasmine Crockett. Few anticipated the first public voice to break the silence would be Justice Clarence Thomas. Known for his near silence on the bench, The famously reticent justice shocked the nation by agreeing, unexpectedly, to deliver remarks at a Georgetown law symposium, scheduled months before the case ever made headlines. The hall was packed. Law students, scholars, politicians. The tension in the room felt like waiting on a verdict. He stepped to the podium. No black robe, just a man once seated at the summit of power, now standing under a different kind of light. Law, he said slowly, is not meant to be a shield for the powerful, nor a sword for the well-connected. The room fell utterly silent. Then he spoke, carefully, candidly, about the moment he discovered the DOJ had buried evidence. I've made rulings I've stood by for decades, but this time, I couldn't just sit and render judgment. I had to stand with the truth. He removed his glasses. His hand trembled as he wiped away a tear. The room rose to its feet, not for his title, but for the rare sight of principle over protocol. The next morning, his words were front-page headlines. Law schools began teaching Crockett vs. the system as a cornerstone case in judicial ethics. Justice Clarence Thomas, once the emblem of silent conservatism, had become the reluctant face of modern judicial responsibility. And Jasmine, no victory, tour, no press blitz, no parades. She simply went home, no motorcade, no entourage, just Jasmine and her small team, quietly visiting the places America had forgotten. Veterans' halls, nursing homes, public schools, church basements. At a modest medical clinic for veterans, a place no politician visits outside election season, Jasmine sat in a folding chair, listening as an elderly woman recounted the impossible wait to access care. Then through tears, the woman spoke of her grandson, wrongfully imprisoned. When Jasmine stood to thank her, the woman reached out and took her hand. I stopped believing in the government a long time ago, but after what you did, I believe in you. Those words weighed heavier than any verdict Jasmine had ever overturned. She nodded, swallowing tears, because in that moment she understood. The courtroom was just the prologue. The real battlefield was here. For weeks, Washington was haunted by a single searing question. If this could happen to her, a congresswoman, a lawyer, with media on her side, what chance does an ordinary citizen have? For Jasmine, it wasn't a theoretical debate. It was a mission. Months later, the Equal Justice Disclosure Act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. Mandatory submission of all exculpatory evidence. Federal whistleblower protections with real enforcement. A bipartisan judicial and prosecutorial oversight council. For the first time in decades, a law born from scandal wasn't used to bury truth in shadows. It was used to shine a light. While pundits debated Jasmine's political future, she didn't appear on cable news. She didn't tweet. She didn't posture. She went back to old neighborhoods, to church halls, to barbershops and farmers markets. She shook the hands of janitors. She hugged grandmothers. Her staff liked to joke. She's the only member of Congress who never asks for a podium, just a folding chair and 5 minutes to listen. Because for Jasmine Crockett, justice was never about a headline. It was about the people no one sees, and the truth they were finally allowed to tell. She skipped every Capitol Hill buffet to sit on folding chairs in church basements, listening not to stories of war fought overseas, but of justice denied here at home. People didn't line up to meet a hero. They came to meet someone who made them feel seen, and when someone asked, "How do you keep going after all that?" she just smiled. Because I'm not fighting for myself. I'm fighting for all of us. Behind the speeches and hearings, Jasmine was still Jasmine, sharp, composed, unapologetically herself. A young aide once shared a moment no one expected to matter. But when it surfaced on a podcast, it spread faster than any viral debate. Clip, just minutes before delivering her landmark address to Congress, the one that moved both parties and helped pass the Equal Justice Disclosure Act, Jasmine tripped on her shoelace and face-planted into the podium. Not a soft stumble. She hit the wood, hard. Papers flew. Cameras kept rolling. Staff rushed to help. The chamber froze. But she didn't panic, didn't blush, didn't freeze. She sat up, dusted herself off, looked straight into the lens and said, "Justice? Sometimes it's just like this. Falling flat on your face in front of the whole nation and still getting up to speak the truth." The chamber burst into laughter and then rose to its feet. Her speech that day became the most shared congressional video of the year, not because she won an argument, but because she earned the trust. Months later, a handwritten quote began appearing on classroom walls, coffee mugs, and awareness campaigns. It came from a note she sent to a high school civics class she had promised to visit. When the powerful begin to tremble because the truth still stands, that's when justice begins. Not a legal opinion, not a viral tweet, just a line, scribbled in pen. And yet, it captured everything. You don't need a grand stage. You don't need a cheering crowd. You only need one person, standing still in the truth, refusing to back down. In a world where power tries to rewrite reality, Jasmine Crockett's story reminds us, truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be spoken with courage. There may come a moment in every person's life, quiet or dramatic, when you stand face to face with injustice, betrayal, or pressure to stay silent. In that moment, you might feel tempted to walk away, to believe that integrity costs too much, that your one small voice doesn't matter. But Jasmine's journey tells us, silence in the face of wrong is complicity, and sometimes one voice, spoken at the right time, can bring down an empire built on lies. She didn't fight with rage. She didn't strike with power. She came armed with documents, resilience, and a heart that refused to pretend. The lesson isn't flashy. It's quiet, like Jasmine, but sharp, like the final ruling from a judge whose hands still trembled with tears. Never underestimate the power of one person who stands for truth, because when one refuses to bow to injustice, they light the way for millions more. This story is fictional. The portrayals of Jasmine Crockett and Clarence Thomas in this script do not represent real-life individuals. Any resemblance to actual events or persons is purely coincidental. If this story moved you, made you pause, reflect, or rekindled your belief in justice, share this video. Leave a comment. How long have I stayed silent? And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Journal, where truth doesn't need permission to exist.